Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Above the Law webinar, powered by Crypto, your future law firm, sponsored by our friends at Embroker. I'm your moderator, Jonathan Shazar. I'm the editor of the Wall Street blog Dealbreaker and a contributor to our aforementioned sister blog, which this audience probably knows a bit better. Before we begin, I just want to get the housekeeping out of the way. First, this webinar is being recorded, so an on-demand version will be available via the same link you used to join us here today. Feel free to watch and rewatch again at your leisure. And second, this is not a German-style university lecture. We want it to be interactive. If you've got a question for the panel, please submit it via the Q&A box on the lower left side of your screen. We'll do our best to pick them up during the flow of the conversation, and we'll try to save some time towards the end of the hour to answer any that may fall by the wayside. If any do, and we don't manage to get to your particular question, we'll make sure someone reaches out to address it. Finally, your participation today entitles you to one whole CLE credit. When the webinar ends, you'll get an email with a certificate to present to your bar association to make sure you get it. But enough of the practicalities. Let's talk crypto. If any of you have happened to read any of my posts on the subject, you've probably gathered that I'm a bit of a skeptic. Although I do own slightly more than 6,000th of an Ethereum, a Christmas gift from my partner's uncle, which is currently worth about half as much as it was when he gave it to me. Not really surprised, given that we're talking amidst arguably the biggest crypto meltdown just yet. Still, my doubts aside, you know, it's abundantly clear that what's come to be known as Web3, which includes cryptocurrencies, NFTs, decentralized finance, DAOs, and everything on the blockchain, and the metaverse aren't going anywhere. Not all of them, anyway. And given the difficulty of tracking and tracing them, cryptocurrencies are already showing up in things like divorce cases and business disputes. And in addition to that, there are some novel uses of the technology, such as smart contracts, that are going to have a direct impact on legal practice and are already starting to bubble up. While at least one law firm, as far as we know, has already hung a shingle in the metaverse. So sooner or later, you're likely to encounter these technologies in some form in your life or your practice if you haven't already. So in this rapidly developing, regulatorily murky, and often confusing space, what do you need to know? We have assembled the panel of experts you see before you to help answer those questions. So let's meet them. I think we'll start, we'll do it alphabetically. Let's start with Jonas.
Hi, I'm Jonas Edgeworth, the Chief Technology Officer at Embroker. And in a previous life, I worked at Veeam, which was a global payments firm, which actually used crypto to move money cross-border.
Olga? We can't hear you, Olga. I think you're on mute.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Olga Mack. I had many adventures in crypto and blockchain. Today, I'm teaching blockchain law at Berkeley Law. I've written a couple of books, one about security of smart contracts and the other one about blockchain business models. I had an opportunity to serve as VP of strategy at Quantum, which is a Y Combinator security of smart contracts protocol, and had an opportunity to lead the company through various transitions. A huge enthusiast of this space and have been in this space full-time, part-time, somehow, one way or another, since 2016.
Fantastic. And Felix?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on this webcast. My name is Felix Shipkevich. I'm an attorney. I run a boutique firm that focuses on fintech regulation and with offices in New York and Miami. I've been in the crypto space since 2010 when I was a general counsel of a commodities futures commission merchant, which is a commodities brokerage. And then subsequently went into the payment space where a lot of these crypto tokens and assets have been the focus of the mainstream news and mainstream media. Additionally, I teach a course called The Policy and Business of Cryptocurrencies at Hotspot Law School for the past 4 years. And thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank all three of you for joining us. I'm really looking forward to tapping your expertise, as I'm sure our guests are. And so to open it up, Seems like a simple question, but obviously the one on which all the others are based. What exactly are cryptocurrencies, the blockchain, and the metaverse? And what do lawyers need to know about them? Jonas, do you want to kick us off here?
Sure. Crypto, at least in its current, incarnation, is, a store of value that, can be a proxy for fiat currency. Sometimes thought of as an investment vehicle. But from my perspective, it's just simply a store of value, as I mentioned. How does, I guess, yeah. Thanks.
Olga, what do lawyers, just sort of basically, what do lawyers need to know about all this stuff?
Well, it is here. It is here to stay. It is being built as we speak. It will be part of your practice one way or another, either because it is a subject of legal advice, or you actually are in fact incorporating it in building your legal practice. For example, how you accept payments. It is rapidly evolving, and the time to learn and be in the game is now.
Felix, what practice areas do you think lawyers, obviously you see them in a lot of areas, but lawyers more generally, what areas are they going to likely to see these technologies arise?
Sure. Obviously, in the financial sector, particularly with financial institutions like broker-dealers and banks, one of the most interesting areas that's developing out of the rise of cryptocurrencies and now the rise of metaverse. I mean, even about a year ago, not many people heard about metaverse or knew what that stands for. In fact, probably many of our listeners today will ask, what is the metaverse? And they're probably Googling as we're discussing it. But financial institutions, banks, and broker-dealers, if I could just take that specific batch of institutions, are heavily focusing on seeing how their consumers would potentially use their services, one, in crypto, right, in the custody of assets, and two, whether or not it's worth to venture into metaverse, right? And there are a lot of questions whether or not, just like some real estate companies or some auction blocks that went into the metaverse, whether or not the financial institutions will want to provide services through metaverse. Some institutions like JP Morgan, for instance, if I'm not mistaken, has already a metaverse presence, but that doesn't really provide any services. It's there sort of for marketing reasons. But I would say initially, primarily just for the financial institutions.
Jonas, Olga, do you have any thoughts on sort of where lawyers are going to be, beyond, is there anything beyond financial services right now? And where are lawyers going to see this stuff crop up?
Some would say that anything blockchain started with Bitcoin. So the most developed applications are in fact financial and money related. And after all, it is related to sort of internet of value. So money is sort of, and value are important and underlying everything that is Web3 and blockchain. But the applications are vast, and frankly, the most exciting things, not that money is not exciting, but there are opportunities in numerous other areas. We see very active development, for example, in gaming. Again, tied to money, but definitely transforming that industry. I think the best way to think about blockchain is really that it is a technology. It's not an industry. It is a technology, just like internet, just like AI, just like, electricity. And what you should expect is that in some distant or not so distant future, blockchain, just like AI, just like internet, just like electricity, will be under the hood of pretty much everything you use. It will be connected. Your interface, what you see in the front of you may or may not change very much, but the capabilities and the back end will change quite a lot, and you will hopefully have more exciting adventures in everything you do.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, there's also, the representation of assets. So, right now people think of NFTs as, fun little memes associated to a unique ID, but really that is changing. There are startups that are starting to represent like concert ticket sales as an asset, purchasing of goods, via a wallet, representing a particular asset, and even securitization. So starting to take something, for example, like a painting, and then representing that on the blockchain as something that can actually be traded amongst people. So it's very interesting.
Absolutely. And one thing that I think it's also coming up, you see a bit in sort of, I guess, in the kind of non-financial aspect, because we're told that blockchain, it's not just about assets necessarily, right? There are other potential applications of the technology, and I think obviously one that would seem to have a really important future, certainly for lawyers, would be smart contracts. Could you guys talk a little bit about smart contracts? What they are, how they might change the way that legal agreements are reached and enforced?
I can talk a little bit about it. I invite folks to take a look at a TEDx San Francisco talk that I delivered about the future of smart contracts about 3 years ago. That would be a pretty good primer. But in short, they're neither smart nor contract. They're pieces of code that store value and verify and self-execute. They're very commonly compared to vending machines, I guess, as an analogy, in that when you put your dollar inside, it verifies that it's authentic, and there is a self-execution. There's storage of that information. There is a verification of that information, and then there is sort of a moment where you get a snack of choice, which is a self-execution moment. So that's what smart contracts are. They are essentially logic statement of if this happens, then that happens. This is a very powerful blockchain application by virtue, because most of the world, most commercial world, legal world, and the rest of the world really is, at an abstract, is a bunch of if-then statements. If you deliver goods, I will give you payments. If you deposit your keys, I will release funds. A lot of word in commerce is basically at a high level if-then statements. So that makes smart contracts and their applications are very powerful. And in fact, what powers a lot of NFTs, various blockchain applications, ICOs, is essentially a bunch of smart contracts. So they are very powerful. They are, however, not smart in the sense that, for example, Felix is very smart. They're smart in a different way. And they're definitely not contracts, just like, contracts where you sign your name at the bottom. So if you want to talk about whether they can be legal contracts, the answer to that is sort of yes and no. Yes, in a sense that if you look at a traditional contracts, especially at a clause level, you can definitely automate various provisions. And as you may guess, given the examples I provided, payment provisions are some of these things that we probably will be automating using smart contracts. As we're lawyers, many of us are, and we know that contracts are full of all kinds of stuff, and a lot of it is dancing in gray, not necessarily if-then statements. Those are probably not going to be primary candidates for smart contracts. So I do think that there will be applications in law. We see some of them are being developed today. They are very exciting as we are transitioning into sort of digital future of legal documents, including contracts. I believe that in the future that very smart lawyers will incorporate smart contracts as an add-on value to their customers, to their clients, to automate important provisions, and payments is a good example of that.
Jonas, you're shaking your head. Do you have anything to weigh in on this front?
Yeah. So I think the key here is that you need an engineer to write these things. right? So this is not something that somebody is going to be able to, in a law office, go ahead and be able to do immediately. You need a team. It would really be what I could see as a startup that is specifically focusing on certain very specific, very vanilla contracts that they can convert into smart contracts and then use something that's templatized for the masses. But I would not see a lot of bespoke development. The other major problem with smart contracts is that it's almost like if you're designing a car or designing a VCR, everything has to be perfect when you write it up front. And if you get it wrong, that bug is in your smart contract forever. And there's been several cases where people lost a massive amount of money due to an error in their smart contract. So yet another place where law may come in to where's the liability held in terms of the smart contract? Was it the executor of the smart contract or the developer of the smart contract?
Right. I mean, I suppose that's not all that. I mean, there are mistakes made in written contracts all the time that also cost people enormous sums. So it sounds like it's not necessarily all that different, except for perhaps the additional liability piece.
Correct.
Well, if I may
Please
insert some drama and disagree a little, let's talk about the ability to code. First of all, if smart contracts, depending how complex they are, may or may not be accessible for lawyers to code. Some of them are pretty simple, and I can bet my money that any one of us who's a member of the bar can figure out a few lines of code. But that aside, the trend in technology is that it's codeless future, essentially. So I can create a website without being able to know HTML or anything like this today. So it is true that the interface in smart contracts today requires code. And I do think that many of us could learn to write simple code. I don't think that's a big deal. But that aside, I do think that the future will hold a much more modular, block-moving future where none of us really will need to code. So that's a point-in-time challenge. The challenge of errors, I do believe, is a much bigger challenge in that, remember, blockchain is a giant ledger where cryptology is a big chunk of it. So it is indestructible and it is forever. And unlike contracts where you make mistake, you can maybe have an amendment, perhaps even have a judge decide on equities. That is a little bit challenging and more problematic in smart contracts because it's really hard to unshoot the gun, so to speak. Nonetheless, I do think that there will be essentially ways to make corrections on the ledger in the future. I think it is a point-in-time challenge. As technology exists today, I agree that it is very hard to use it in daily legal applications when you negotiate, contracts. However, I do think that the benefit of, say, putting a smart contract in a clause of a payment and give an instantaneous delivery of funds upon delivery of goods is such a great force, commercially speaking, that I believe there will be a number of innovations to make sure that we don't have too many human errors when we put it in our legal contracts.
We've got a question. I think we might want to go just briefly a bit more high level. A question here from Janet Tabbitt. I'm sorry if I've mispronounced that. But could you guys provide an overview of a smart contract? Like what exactly it means? Jonas, Olga, I don't know if either of you feel most comfortable. Maybe you guys have different takes on it, given what we just heard. So,
what is the question?
Could you provide an overview of a smart contract?
Overview meaning how it works or what it is? Because I believe I did it. Maybe somebody else wants to take a different approach.
Yeah, it's effectively, it's effectively a program. And that program acts or modifies, I would say, wallets or kind of nodes in the actual that are represented by the blockchain. So a smart contract may be, as Olga defined, the bill of lading has passed, so therefore, immediately transfer X amount of Ethereum from wallet A to wallet B. So that may be one example. Other example might be escrow. So there might be once a certain sets of capabilities are provided, whether that's funds or requirements met, then again release funds. There are multiple methods that might be defined, but it really is a set of instructions that manipulate assets on the blockchain.
Great, thank you so much for that. And Janet, if you'd like to post a follow-up, certainly feel free. If we didn't do your question justice, we have another question from the audience as well. This is from James Corbett, who says that the phrase "store of value" has been used a number of times and in different contexts. Could you unpack what you mean by it?
I'm happy to take that one. The easiest way to understand stored value, that's what I tell my students, is gift cards, right? Essentially, it is something that is able to store value. The traditional way was always to have a gift card that would have some value that you hold to it. And essentially what it does is that gift card can only be used with that one specific merchant. The rise of cryptocurrencies and the use of blockchain has essentially created what's called an open loop for stored value, where and of course you have to think about all the regulatory issues for that stored value, because essentially now you're able to use that a lot more freely, and that stored value can be traded for other assets, for other mediums of exchange, right? So a good example is if you had, if your friends, when I was growing up in the 90s, and your friends brought you your Gap gift card, you can only use it at Gap, right? You can only use it on, you can't take Gap and go to Victoria's Secret, right? You can't do that because that would essentially be outside the loop. Today, you have, if you walk into any Best Buy, any Walgreens, CVS, any pharmacy, you're able to actually buy a card, something that we could put value, and use it in other places other than where you bought it, right? You can use it at that CVS, or you can go and use that on Amazon. And usually the stored value is issued by a bank, right? Essentially, there's a relationship between the card issuer and the bank. And sometimes actually the banks would issue these stored values. So that's kind of the very, very high level, 30,000 foot level of what stored value is.
I'll provide another definition, and we have it every day. And it's, the wallet in the back of your pocket is a store of value. Your bank account is a store of value. And, in that case, it's fiat currency issued by the US government. So there are many different institutions that can, invent or create value. The Fed does that, prints money all the time. So, and it's not, so it's not exclusive to governments. Private institutions can create stores of value as well.
And Jen, just another question coming up from the audience, again from James Corbett. I think you guys have answered, but just to make it as clear as you can, a smart contract is, for all practical purposes, self-executing.
Yeah, it's a piece of code. So the condition, you specify the condition, and when the condition is met, the consequence follows. So the code may specify that if you deliver goods, and that is stored, and when that happens, it's verified, and the self-executing moment is the automatic delivery of funds. It's a piece of code that essentially deposits money into your account. So in my example, when you put that piece of code in your legal contract, essentially, that makes your legal contract really powerful. Because, many of us who, for example, have been in-house, it's one thing to agree that you sold something and you will get the money and then deliver the goods. But then collection, sometimes is a complicated, long process. And imagine for the contracts you have today, you had automatic payment provisions. And that's something that you actually can negotiate with the other side so that the cycle of travel of goods, essentially, and services would be much smoother and much more automated and automatic, and presumably will diminish the collection time, for example.
So you're right. So it's one thing to agree to sign a contract to buy Twitter. It's another thing to actually get the $44 billion out of Elon Musk's hand in the current world. But so I guess that's the sort of question. What would it mean? I imagine it probably differs from smart contract to smart contract depending on the coding. But what is the verification process that allows things to self-execute?
So the verification process could be on-chain if it is available to be verified on-chain, or it could be done off-chain using things like oracles. So sometimes the conditions for payments may be from the outside world, for example, weather or stock market or something like that. So you have another mechanism called oracles that provides that information for the automatic execution of smart contract.
Got another question coming up from the audience from Robin Davis. Which is, how is the value of crypto determined, though? Both cash and gift cards have a static currency value. I mean, obviously, to a certain extent, fiat currency, doesn't have a static value, right? It also rises and falls compared to other stores of value. I imagine, the same is true, obviously, of cryptos.
Yeah, so crypto can be floating freely, just like some currencies are floating freely, or just in fiat world. They can also be pegged to either other cryptocurrencies or commodity or fiat. So we do see in the marketplace things called stable coins, for example, that are pegged to, United States dollar or gold or something like that. So there is a way to stabilize, and for transactions where fluctuation will not be appreciated, for example, when you sell goods and services, that's probably the primary use of stable coins, and we see that in the marketplace today. And I'm sorry, I think I interrupted somebody.
I was just going to say, so if we don't talk about the security side, the securitized digital assets, let's kind of put that in a different bucket, right? And then stable coins, what Olga mentioned, I mean, that's a different bucket. The way I look at it is a completely separate bucket because there's still kind of a lot of issues that needs to be clarified by various regulators. But let's talk about just the traditional crypto. I mean, how do you find the value? If anybody could find the value and let me know, maybe I could retire very soon. I mean, the reality is supply and demand, and there's really absolutely no reason why anything has any value when it comes to crypto. I belong to the group of attorneys and practitioners who believes that, today Bitcoin is at 28, tomorrow it could be 100,000, then day after it could be 3,000. Absolutely no basis. It's not like you're looking at a publicly traded company. I'm giving you Bitcoin as an example, right? It's not like you're looking at a publicly traded company that has reporting. You're looking at the insider trading. You're looking at certain required disclosure. That's really supply and demand, and we have absolutely no way to know what and how the value is calculated other than just supply and demand. Simple as that.
Yeah, I imagine that part of the, what brings up that question. Obviously, we talked about, stable coins being pegged to the value of another asset. Of course, over the last week or so, we've seen that is not all, but that's something that can break down, I guess, which is sort of the general volatility of things, in such an environment. I mean, what if you're not, deeply into the space, I guess that sort of raises these kind of questions. But I want to move on a little bit towards how lawyer. Oh, here we have a clarification. This is again, this is from Janet again. She's looking to understand better the why a smart contract might be more useful than how we do certain transactions today. Using the escrow example, it's not too hard to determine whether or not escrow has been met. We get that thousands of contracts, there would be a time saver, but the usefulness is still a bit unclear for small transactions, which I guess you could say, is true of, a lot of people ask the question as to the usefulness of crypto generally. So do any of you, Jonas, do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I think it's, it's really about institutionalization of infrastructure. Now, there are private companies that could build like a closed loop version of this for automating, the escrow process. But there are definitely cases where having it on chain where it can be verified independently by multiple parties is really key. So I think global commerce is a real key. So I've got this bill of lading. I've validated that these shipping containers have made it to the port, and I've checked the box, and then that may actually release the funds from the purchaser to the person that made those goods. And companies are building this out such that this can actually scale at in a very large way and take over some of these processes that were extremely manual before, making the process extremely efficient.
And yeah, immediately when you're talking about that, what immediately comes to mind is something from the insurance world. I know a couple of large insurers have recently put the subrogation process, which is the means by which insurers, pay each other for, different claims against, one another, what would in the past have been tens of thousands of checks a day. All of a sudden you put it on the blockchain and it just simplifies everything.
Right. Yes.
Simplifies and expedites.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
And those are two key things in commerce, which is why I strongly believe that whatever challenges we have with smart contracts today, of which we have numerous, there is a lot of financial motivation to solve them and address them in a way so that the features of speed and efficiency can be used in commerce.
Absolutely. I wonder if you might talk. We've talked a bit about how these technologies might come up in terms of a lawyer's practice, and I'm more than happy to talk a bit more about that. But I was also wondering if you could discuss a bit about the business side of being a lawyer, running a law firm. How do you think that law firms are likely to encounter blockchain, other Web3 technologies in their day-to-day business operations, if at all? Is this something that they have to worry about in the short term? Is this something? I think we all agree that it's going to be there in the long term, but what do they have to know now?
I'm happy to jump in.
Yeah, by all means.
Sure. It depends on the law firm. It depends on the type of service that you provide. If you're a consumer attorney and you're dealing with, consumers, bankruptcy, family law, personal injury, workers' comp, the like. I don't know whether or not today you need to think about it. I don't know if we have enough advanced technology to blockchain technology that would help consumer lawyers. If you are corporate/institutional type of lawyer, if you work with institutions, you should be ready that they could ask you questions. We're looking to launch the following products. Should we use blockchain? Should we use, technology of smart contracts? Hey, we're looking to launch trade crypto, or or can we start accepting crypto? How do we find the right custodial of services. I belong to the second group of attorneys, and this comes up all the time, right? And especially as a regulatory attorney, I have clients who are, from small to large financial institutions who just always have interesting ideas involving cryptocurrencies and blockchain, and they want to run it by me. And you have to constantly keep up with what's going on to make sure that you can have intelligent conversation. Of course, if you are, you could be on the corporate side, and like I have colleagues who, I have, friends who work at big firms and they do litigation, and they don't know anything about cryptocurrency or blockchain, and they said that their clients constantly ask them, particularly when it comes to litigation involving those services. So it really depends on the type of practice you're running.
Yeah, I do see, kind of, I think on, kind of if we're talking like bankruptcy or divorce, or where the ownership of assets is in dispute, definitely an area where, I would see, that popping up more and more, and the likelihood of needing to pull in someone specialized in forensic investigation to actually be able to determine whether or not a particular individual actually is holding a particular crypto. In some cases it's very easy because, they're on Coinbase or FTX or whatever, but whatever exchange is out there. But a lot of times, they might just have it on a thumb drive, their wallet on the thumb drive. And so that's very portable and very easy to hide.
I think I agree with that assessment, and it depends. And the more tied to money, assets, and value, the more you need to know about the new types of assets and value. I also think that there is, we all as humans are in different spectrum of eagerness to learn more about new technology and think ways it can help us. This technology is fairly nascent, but it also has opportunities outside of money and value, and has applications in law, and may have applications in law. And for those of us who are on the sort of early adopters curve, that may be an opportunity to provide better services, to be on a cutting edge, to gain advantage. So I do think that it is opportunity, just like with everything new, to be learning and building and figuring out how to deliver bigger, better value to your clients. And I think independent of your practice, blockchain could mean that in your practice, and starting learning about it today and thinking of ways to use it and experiment. Maybe the time is now.
Yeah, and I think one follow-on point is, one way that you can do it, is through payments. Are you going to accept payment in cryptocurrency for your services? Now, I think that largely depends if you are risk on or risk off. Given what's happened in the market recently, I'm guessing most people would be risk off, but maybe this is a buy low, sell high opportunity for folks. But that is a very easy way to move in that direction.
It is an easy way. I agree with that. And it gives you a skin in the game. Sometimes nothing motivates learning more than having a skin in the game. Someone here mentioned getting a gift of 6,000.
Six 1,000th.
Oh,
Boy, would I love to have 6,000 Ethereum.
Okay, well, I put 20 at some point. It's not a recommended amount. I think you should talk to a financial advisor and do what's comfortable for you. And I had an opportunity of my husband to tell me how irresponsible it is of me to lose half of it and then more. And he joked that I am gambling with my kids' college fund. Then, of course, when I went back up, he never told me how brilliant I was. But in any event, it really gave me a fantastic motivation to learn more And when you struggle with MetaMask and various other, this technology is very nascent. It doesn't have a great interface. It's really clunky. You really are forced to learn and network with people who do these things. It really expedites your learning. But at the same time, it also gives you a window, an opportunity to see what's possible. And really, for those of us who are more entrepreneurial, who want to try new things, serve our clients better, that really gives us another thing another tool to incorporate in our practice, and whether it's in giving advice or actually receiving payments or delivering value to our clients.
Yeah, and I totally agree that the payments thing is. I want to turn it over to point this towards Felix, which is, so what does it mean for a lawyer to be getting paid in crypto? What are tax other implications of doing so, of making move into that area?
Sure. So I mean, the IRS early on, it's been almost like, I believe, 7 years since IRS said that they view cryptocurrencies as assets, and so. If you're making money and if you're exiting out, you have a realized profit, you have to pay capital gains, and there's a lot of emphasis on exchanges in the U.S. and broker deals in the U.S. and financial institutions that offer cryptocurrency trading or holding or stored value to report and to provide the necessary tax forms to their constituents, their clients, and so the proper losses and gains could be reported to the IRS. And, I can't tell you how many calls I've had where people said, yeah, but that's not legal tender. Why do I need to care about it? And, and the example is, well, neither is real estate that you sell. And if you made money in real estate in this crazy real estate market, it doesn't necessarily mean that you could avoid paying taxes. So the short answer is, yes, the government wants your money, okay, in both federal and state level. And if you think that you're smart enough to avoid the reporting part of it because you think, well, the IRS just wouldn't care. Well, they would, and they're becoming actually a lot more aggressive these days with audits. So yeah, so if you're accepting money, it's recognize it, discuss it with your CPA, your accountants, and don't ignore it.
Yeah, and let me pile on to that point of making sure you pay your taxes. I mean, again, this is an immutable ledger. So it is a record of every single transaction. The government has gone through and scanned every single transaction on the blockchain, and they can typically tie a particular wallet to an individual. So not something that you want to mess with.
And most importantly, we see, some of the most voracious learners in the space is government. I personally provided quite a lot of training, and I know a lot of people who do this. You see a lot of demand. So you are increasingly dealing with a very powerful, very educated player. Yes, they've scanned. They also really are increasingly proficient in navigating this. So we have seen some enforcement, and I am certain that we will see even more.
I want to put a pin in that because obviously I think the regulatory situation around crypto and the blockchain are really interesting. But we've got another question from the audience. And James wants to know, have any of you encountered the use of cryptos as a means of litigation finance? I mean, something like this. A client has a case, but not enough money to finance it. The lawyer could simply take a chance and take the case as a speculation or have contingency arrangement, not permissible everywhere. But the client might have to be able to acquire cryptos. The lawyer takes the risk of the plunging value, but may take the chance of increasing and has something to cash in at some point. Any thoughts on crypto and litigation finance?
Why not just have the client convert crypto into USD and pay a lawyer in USD? I mean, it just seems like, and then also there's a whole legal ethics question which hasn't really been addressed by the bar of all 50 states. I haven't seen any. Please, I'd love to see if anybody. How do you keep crypto in escrow? Your IOLTA accounts will not allow you to hold it because banks are not open to that yet. It's going to get there in a few years, but how do you hold that in escrow without violating legal ethics and professional responsibility rules?
I guess that's a original question, Felix. Has the bar dealt with any bar associations you're familiar with? Have they dealt with matters?
I have not.
At all? No,
I have not. No, and it's a question that's being asked quite a lot these days because, I have clients who say, "Hey, will you take a retainer in Bitcoin?" And I said to them, "Why would I waste my time? Just go to an exchange, convert it to USD, and send me a wire. Pretty simple, right? Well, why can't you just keep it in Bitcoin? Where am I going to keep it? What am I going to keep it at a wallet? Are we violating professional responsibility? I'm licensed in New York, so in the New York professional responsibility rules, I can't keep clients' funds as escrow outside of the IOLA account. I'll get into trouble. I mean, that's one of the biggest reasons you could get disbarred is by not following the proper IOLA rules. So I tell them just convert it and send the wire in your USD and solves the problem.
we have one of the members of the audience wondering or suggesting, could you just hold it with a smart contract in the decentralized system?
I think it would be great to get clarity from the bar, right? I think we all value our license to practice law. Again, question of time when the bar will address it, depending on your jurisdiction. And, depending how much you want to gamble with your license, you may want to wait for that.
One thing, we're curious a little bit is when you're dealing in these things, the most important thing would be to have some kind of solid guidance from the bar or some sort of, regulatory regime, totalizing regulatory regime in place. I can't speak to the bar aspect, but certainly the regulatory matter doesn't seem like it's going to be resolved anytime soon. So I guess my question is, what do law firms need to have in play? Jonas, you mentioned earlier with smart contracts, well, you might need an engineer, when you're dealing with certain cases or things for clients that you might need to bring in forensic experts to deal with these things. Are there other things that law firms need to sort of have in order to start taking advantage of the opportunities presented here and to mitigate the risks?
I would expect that there's going to be companies that are going to provide services that solve many of these problems on the blockchain. So that's what I expect. So, particularly on the forensic side, like if they're using something like blender.io to, attempt to launder money, somebody's got to go through and do the analysis and track all the transactions to be able to figure out where did that transaction or that money originally, come from. And even in smart contract construction, I don't expect a small law office to actually be building smart contracts. But what might, as Olga kind of referenced, there might be like a low code, no code SaaS-based service that allows you to build cookie cutter smart contracts available to you. So that's really where I see things going.
Felix, do you have any thoughts on what law firms should have in place, or are there sort of Jonas sort of suggested that perhaps this is an area that's still developing, but are there key third parties that lawyers need to know and start developing relationships with? Is there insurance and other sorts of protection that they need? What kind of technologies and other services are out there that can help?
I mean, to be completely candid, I think that again, I'll give you my unfiltered view. I don't see a reason to look into something unless you, A, feel that there's an opportunity and want to learn more about it, or two, have a real need for it right away, right? If if we're going to go break them into small, mid-size, or large law firms, again, if a small law firm really needs it or wants to explore it, sure. The question is, how much of your time and assets, financial assets, and human resources do you want to devote to it? For mid-sized firms, it really depends on the type of practice areas that they have and whether or not it also makes sense. Big Law has already explored, and I give a lot of credit to Big Law for looking into different products and services for its own staff, for its own clients. It's a different beast, right? They also work quite a lot on the international level. So A, the opportunity is there, and two, there's actually a need for many of them. And they have to educate their employees. They have to educate their attorneys. It's not something that they could just ignore. And also not every department. It's just also some attorneys. So,
Olga, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have some thoughts. I have many thoughts. I don't have an opinion whether you should try or not. I think it really just depends whether you're a opportunistic person who likes to learn. And for those of us who are, there will be opportunities. However, if you do that, there are a lot of traps for unwary. Several speakers have alluded to the fact that you can lock out your funds. You can have problems in your code that they can be stolen. This is a fairly complicated technology. So you need to make sure to the extent you use smart contracts, that they are actually audited and they don't have loopholes. If I do think it's very important to have somebody who can kind of help you navigate the technology. That person doesn't have to be an engineer. That person just has to be very savvy and done it before many, many times. I also think it's important to have an accountant who is savvy and understands the landscape that is very quickly changing. We have seen a number of regulations come out. We will see many, many more. This is going to be a very changing landscape of regulations and practices, and they're developing as we speak. So I think that is very important. If you have any adventures in crypto, blockchain, or smart contracts, Web3, or anything like that, and I personally encourage you to have it because I think that's an opportunity for all of us as humans, not just as lawyers. I think you also need to make sure that you have people in your corner who can help you and make sure that you don't fall prey to traps for unwary.
I wanted to give us a chance to touch briefly on sort of the regulatory piece, if we are feeling like doing some speculating here. But first I wanted to just again, where we've got about 6 or 7 minutes left. I want to invite members of the audience to submit any questions that they might have, and we can try to get a couple minutes in at the end to let the panelists address them. But yeah, where do you see the regulatory environment, developing? Obviously, this could be some real differences jurisdictionally here, but where is the regulatory environment going, and how do you think that might impact lawyers who are using some of these technologies in their practice and on the business side?
It's a very difficult question to answer in the short amount of time that we have. It really depends on the politics in Washington. For instance, Gary Gensler, who's right now heads the Securities and Exchange Commission, was formerly chair of the CFTC for a number of years, particularly post the financial meltdown of 2008. He joined the SEC, and he's quite vocal about most of crypto being securities. Okay, so I'm a payments lawyer. I'm not a securities lawyer, I'm a commodities and payments lawyer. So obviously, I don't agree with that view wholeheartedly. I think that we have obviously tokens, crypto that are securities, but I don't believe that one size fits all type of approach. There's been also quite a lot of ambiguity from the SEC on what exactly is decentralized, what are centralized, ecosystems, and how do you differentiate between the two? So in the short, there's a view that a lot of it is moving towards the SEC side, but it hasn't moved there yet, and you have to look at the state law and other. You have to look at payments laws, money transmission laws, bit license in New York. You have to look at the CFTC because crypto is a commodity, so But we could go on and on about this particular question.
Do you think that the SEC, if the SEC does decide to act, is it something you think the SEC could act on successfully, or is this sort of the authority that Congress is going to have to give it?
It's a great question. So the SEC, for the SEC to act on it, has to happen one of two ways, right? Well, I would say 2.5 ways. The 0.5 is really providing speech and testimonies, which, frankly, annoy the crap out of me, because when you have directors or commissioners of the SEC give speeches and testimonies, you as a practitioner have to decipher what they just said in that speech, which is very novel. It's frustrating. It really shouldn't be the way. The proper way is they're part of the executive branch. They have to propose rules. People comment on those rules, and then they adopt those rules, right? And so you have this democratic process. What's been happening over the past decade or so on the federal level, and we're seeing it not just with the SEC, we're seeing it with the CFPB, we're seeing it with the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, and the CFTC. Instead of promulgating the rules, we're getting a lot of enforcement action. So why legislate from the executive branch, the regulatory side? Well, you can just go ahead and find the low-hanging fruit and tell them you're going to sue them and get a consent order, and that consent order is not going to be the new legal precedent. So I don't know which way the SEC is going to go. I hope there's going to be some checks and balances in that process. I hope it's not going to be the third option, just enforcement, because enforcement isn't there just to kind of create rules. It's there to enforce rules, and so when an executive part of a branch of an executive, an agency, decides to enforce through legal proceedings, I just don't think that's the right way to correctly do it. To add one comment, though, I think right now, one big problem is related to a lot of new coins coming out through ICOs, which are effectively just an unregulated Ponzi scheme. And so I do see the government looking to take action in those cases to help clamp down that and provide some guardrails around some of those practices. But yes, agreed with most of what Felix had to say.
We've got
the only thing to note of recent development is President Biden's order.
Right.
We finally have acknowledged that crypto and blockchain is here. There is absolutely references there to we should be staying safe. So I do agree that there will be enforcement related to safety and Ponzi schemes and whatnot. There's also sort of a larger mandate to study this and see application. California has had a working group and published a fantastic report about what's possible. So I do think that we're going to see regulations, increasingly more so. There are, of course, plenty of regulations related to fraud and things that, you should not be stealing and stuff like that. But there may be more specific things as well. I think we'll see as regulators and legislators become a little bit more savvy, understanding, and frankly, a lot of applications could be government related. One of the things that is, for example, very actively discussed is the central bank coins. We will see kind of more guardrails and clarity. That, of course, will take time. That, yes, of course, could be susceptible to winds of politics. But I do definitely think that we are heading that way, and we'll definitely see more coming very soon.
Before I know we're pretty much at time, but I want to give you all a chance to respond to a couple of questions that the audience has given us. First was, how often is this used in real estate transactions in lieu of wired funds?
I think it's bespoke. It's one-off. It's kind of like the trope of the guy going in and buying a Lambo with, Bitcoin, right? So yeah, one-off maybe. If somebody's going to go do something like this, it would probably be Compass. So Compass, as a very tech-forward real estate firm, I could see them building in payment rails that would include crypto. But that's where it would happen, in my view, if we were going to see something big.
Let me just really quickly add, I'll tell you that I've seen this primarily in South Florida, with South Florida real estate, where there's a lot of money being directed and has been directed by individuals from China, Russia, and other countries that, you're not comfortable holding funds in those countries. So I'm not a real estate lawyer, but I've been hired to assist in my client is based in Russia and wants to pay for a $4 million apartment. And they only want to pay in crypto. They don't want to convert because they can't convert it in Russia. So how do you facilitate the transaction? So it is a bespoke. I agree 100%. But I also have seen an enormous increase in South Florida, the need for that.
Hence the Lambos.
and Ferraris and everything else, yeah.
We have another question specifically to you, Felix, but feel free to weigh in, Olga and Jonas.
Sure.
What are some examples of how Big Law is using or exploring smart contracts now?
Okay. I don't work for Big Law. I've consulted for Big Law. Not so much specifically on smart contracts, but and I also cannot speak on of how effective or ineffective the use of smart contracts has been with Big Law. But for instance, about 5 years ago, 2017, I remember seeing a press release, and I don't know whether this firm is K&L Gates. They've implemented their own internal blockchain, and they're using smart contracts for some of the internal files, and particularly for searching files that were stored on their internal systems. I don't know whether or not that has successfully been implemented or is working. Yes, that's one example. I really don't keep track. I apologize on how other firms are using it.
I think that's about right. I don't intentionally keep track, but I guess kind of keep track. What we did have see this year or the last year or so is a few law firms in metaverse because they see a business opportunity there. And there are a few that claim being there first and kind of buying real estate and stuff like that because they want to meet their customers where they are. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I do think that smart contracts, for the loopholes that we described and for the challenges they have, really have the timing is not today to implement it in your contract. The timing today is to learn and experiment and be well positioned to use it in the future.
And even though we're a little over here, there's one last one, since it's the only question we got left. It's a speculative one, so buckle in, guys. If you had to predict a specifically crypto-related scandal that would give rise to a litigation boom, what would it be?
Major crypto exchange going bankrupt.
This is the sort of the recent the
Coinbase,
the Coinbase
publicly traded crypto exchange going bankrupt.
Yeah.
Ecuador.
I think there will be a lot of turbulence. Without naming names, I think there will be surprising and expected turbulence. We are still very much in the beginning and building and addressing many opportunities. And this is a very complex technology that has very complex laws associated with it and very complex finance associated with it. It's complex all around. So we are very much in learning, and learning involves mistakes, and some mistakes will be big. Hopefully they will not be catastrophic.
Great. Well, with that, I think that's a great way to end on what you said is a very sort of complex and growing more so as it sort of rapidly evolves. So Felix, Jonas, Olga, thank you all so much for offering your expertise in this space here on today's webinar sponsored by Embroker. Just to want to remind everyone again, this is recorded. So if you missed something, if you joined us late, or if you want to go back and take a look at anything, by all means, and that you will be receiving your email with sort of a handout about the metaverse and some of the things we've talked about today, as well as your CLE credit after this. So thanks again so much, everyone, for joining us. We really appreciate it.